Welcome, for the first time it seems, to Hollywood history. I had a hard time trying to decide which historical film I should start with. I've been watching World War II movies for a long time, and I've watched many historical films, so I had a lot to choose from. But I was going to start right with Patton, possibly the greatest biopic ever made. The film garnered extreme success, earning $60 million in 1970, and being nominated for 10 Oscars and winning 7. This included Best Picture and Best Actor, which George C. Scott refused to accept. The movie was written by Francis Ford Coppola, who would follow up Patton with The Godfather. The guy's got a good record. But that's not what we're concerned with. We're concerned with history. And how does Patton hold up to history? George S. Patton Jr. was born in California on November 11, 1885. Even as a young child, Patton wanted to follow in the steps of his ancestors and become a war hero. His father was a Confederate colonel during the Civil War. In 1904, he joined military school. There he became quite an avid athlete, even competing in the 1912 Olympics. Afterwards, he was sent to the Mounted Service School in Kansas, becoming Master of the Sword. Patton was very accident-prone, however, and a head injury that occurred while he was at the school is even thought to have resulted in his temper and famous cursing. When the U.S. joined the war in 1970, Patton joined John J. Pershing, the namesake of the M26 Pershing, in Europe, developing the American Expeditionary Force Tank Corps. He displayed his knowledge in the field of tank combat when he used his tactics to lead Allied troops to victory in the Battle of Cambrai, the first majorly successful use of tanks in history. He established a tank school later where he taught soldiers how to use the French Renault tanks. He was injured in the Meuse-Argonne offensive, which took him out of the war. He was later awarded the Distinguished Service Medal for his actions. And then, of course, World War II happened, just 19 years later. Hitler's Blitz tore through Europe, taking control of most of the continent, but crucial raw materials were needed to continue the war. This made North Africa a place of extreme importance. Combat had taken place in North Africa since mid-1940, soon after Britain's withdrawal from France. Britain and Australia had done a good job holding off the Nazis before the arrival of the US, such as in the battle at Tobruk and the major decisive blow against Rommel at the Second Battle of El Alamein. El Alamein coincided with Operation Torch, which was the invasion of North Africa by the United States. Churchill said, "It must also be said, before Alamein we never had a victory. After Alamein we never had a defeat." Operation Torch is where it gets good, 'cause America. From November 8th through the 16th, 1942, the Allied forces invaded Vichy French Algeria to try and draw troops away from North Africa to ease pressure on the Red Army. The Allied armies formed a pincer around the Axis troops. This is actually the first use of U.S. paratroopers during the war. The invasion was hugely successful. While large shortcomings in Allied strategies showed themselves in the battle, and the invasion failed to draw away a number of Axis troops, it was the first point in World War II, more than 3 years in, where the Allies had the advantage. Part of the success, however, may have been due to the fact that the enemy was mainly the Vichy French and not the Germans. This may have been the reason for the catastrophe of the Battle of Kasserine Pass. On February 14, 1942, Rommel launched an offensive against the Allied defensive line, and this is where Rommel's strategic genius is truly displayed. Rommel wanted to take the capital of Tunis. He spotted a weak spot in the line at the Kasserine Pass held by the Americans. Though his first attack was repulsed, Rommel's tank force was able to push through, inflicting serious casualties on the Allies. 1,000 men were killed and many others taken prisoner. The Allies withdrew, leaving behind most of their equipment. So the movie begins with Patton's speech, probably the most famous scene in the entire film. And this is a minor anachronism, but the scene as a whole needs some context. The actual speech was given in 1944 on the eve of D-Day. Some lines came from other speeches Patton gave. In the movie, you can see that Patton is a 4-star general during the speech. This didn't actually occur until after the Battle of the Kasserine Pass, however. Honestly, the movie wouldn't be as amazing if it wasn't the first words that we heard from Patton, and it really was barely worth mentioning. But it has to be known, there is no exact version of the speech. None survived up to the 50s, but from what we know, this is about as close as it gets. Although it has to be made a little bit less profane so that the movie didn't get an R rating.
That's enough.
The first notable inaccuracy made is after Patton reaches the army base. The air raid during the talks about air superiority is true. However, Patton never shot at a plane with his handgun. It's not totally out of character from what I can find, but as far as I can find, it didn't happen. This is probably the film's biggest inaccuracy.
George, we need a corps commander, not a casualty.
Next is the famous battle scene showing part of the Battle of El Guitar. Patton's tank force destroys Rommel's and inflicts heavy casualties on his infantry. Then Patton says his very famous line,
Rommel, you magnificent bastard, I read your book!
Only problem is Rommel hadn't finished his book on tanks by that time. However, Patton did study Rommel and tried to learn his tactics, so once again, this isn't out of the realm of possibility. The movie does a very good job in showing the success in the North African campaign, but Patton being a major part of that success is still debated. The final inaccuracy I will talk about is the scene with the weather prayer. In this scene, Patton is praying for better weather so the Allies could use air power again during the Ardennes counteroffensive, or as it's commonly known, the Battle of the Bulge. In real life, however, Patton asked a priest to give the prayer, and this inaccuracy is incredibly minor. It should also be noted that the prayer took place during the Lorraine campaign, not the Ardennes counteroffensive. Besides this, the Ardennes counteroffensive is portrayed incredibly accurately.
With which we've had to contend. Grant us fair weather for battle. Graciously hearken to us, as soldiers who call upon thee, that armed with thy power, we may advance from victory to victory.
Well, those are about the only very notable inaccuracies. Most of the other inaccuracies are small or done for time constraints. This is done by combining multiple similar events into one scene or moving smaller events around so they could still be used, such as the weather prayer, for example. This is also done by using equipment that didn't exist in the time. This can be seen through the use of the T-6 Texan being used as a fighter plane, or the ironically named M46, 47, and 48 Patton tanks used to portray Tigers, Panzers, and Shermans. They don't affect the main story, and I feel like people who complain about these inaccuracies are just looking for something to complain about. I said before that if you haven't seen this movie, you need to get on it. This movie gets a lot right, a lot more than the vast majority of history movies. I didn't want to go into extreme details so that I wouldn't spoil anything, so please watch it, and if you've already watch it again. It's well worth your time. Well, that's about all. Thanks for watching, everyone. This was very fun to make, but also tiring. If you like this video, please share it around. Leave comments if I got something wrong. Feedback, as always, is helpful. Subscribe if you want to see more videos, and I hope I'll see you again soon. Have a good one.